Morning, friends. Can we heard? I was watching one of those videos where they interview elderly couples, and I think these were all from different parts of the world. And they were asking this couple, what is the secret of success of their marriage, or how are they happy for these many years with each other? And I think this couple from the US, they were in their mid-80s, and the lady was so sweet, and she was smiling as she was saying this, and she said, the success of a good marriage is to remember always that the partner will always disappoint you in some way or the other. Not just once, but over and over again, and it's all right. And it's all right, and you can still be happy. And because I'm not perfect, so I don't expect everyone around me to be perfect also. Now, of course, that's very wise, but not in an inspiring, uplifting way. At least for me, it's almost in a humbling, a bitter pill to swallow kind of way. And it is true, though, if you think about it. And it is a hard lesson to even think about. Everything will disappoint you. Your partner will disappoint you. Life will disappoint you, even to think about it that way. The reading that we just read today from the Bible, it's almost talking about the same principle from a different lens, where Jesus is quoted as saying, "Be therefore perfect." What is that perfection that he's talking about? What is that perfection that we're all aspiring towards? It is hard to tell often unless we tune into the essence of the verse itself and exactly in the way that Swami Ananda is describing it here. Because we get confused as to what this perfection is, what is it that we are seeking, because we are always seeking something. We are always pursuing this almost state of balance that we are desperately running behind all the time. If I can say one thing from my little experience over the last decade or so on the spiritual path, and also just being with many friends and talking to others, it's very obvious to me that all of us are seeking somewhat of a state of balance, that we are trying to be something. And we come at it in so many different ways, whatever it is that it means for us. I want to be better at this. I want to break this bad habit. I want to meditate more. I want to eat healthier. I want to have 10,000 steps on my Fitbit every day. I want to be harmonious in this relationship, or I don't want this job. I want to be in that job. And we keep tinkering. We keep trying again and again and again. That's all of life. That's all of spiritual path. We keep coming back to it because we want to be better at it. We want to grow, we want to expand, and we want to not be disappointed at ourselves, and we want to keep trying again and again. And we keep tinkering with life. I remember I was driving with a friend many years ago, and this must have been a fairly long drive, I don't quite remember. And we were in the car, and we were having a good conversation, but I was starting to notice that my friend was a bit restless. It was a warm day, it was in the afternoon, and he was trying to, he first turned the AC on. He asked me if I needed the AC. I said, sure. And he turned the AC on, and then in 2 minutes he would realize it was too cool. And then he would turn a little bit, he would turn the temperature up a little bit. And then after 4 minutes, he would realize, no, it's too warm. I'm going to turn it up, turn the temperature down a bit more. I'll turn the fan up. Maybe I'll feel better. And I just realized, just 5 minutes ago, we were listening to music in the car, and he was doing the same thing with the volume. Oh, this is too loud. Oh, the instrument would be better if it was just softer. Oh, I don't hear the words. Let me just turn it up a little bit. Just here, just this tendency in all of us just to get it right exactly. And I was sitting there thinking, maybe I should just say, it's okay. How about we just enjoy, and it's fine. Maybe it's a little cooler than we want it to be, maybe a little warmer. It's all fine. But then, thankfully, I caught myself, because whatever was making him restless and making him do all of that was the same thing in me. I wanted to now fix him. And so he would stop doing that. And then I realized, no, it's okay. Let him do what he wants to do, and maybe he'll realize, maybe he won't. It really doesn't matter. Swami Ananda often, he would quote this example of trying to wash a shirt or something when you dunk it in a bucket of water. You put the shirt in, and immediately the air bubbles up like this, and you try to push it in, and it comes up somewhere else, and and then you push that in, and it comes up somewhere else. And you can do that endlessly when you try to put a piece of cloth in a bucket of water. That's not going to get it in. The only way to get the shirt in is to actually take it out and take all the kinks out, all the self-definitions of what makes it a shirt. And once that's out, you can actually submerge it in the bucket of water, and it will be fine. But we cannot also stop because we do want to get it right. There is this part of us that is trying to get it all in order. That somehow, if I fix this, if I fix that, if I then fix this other thing, it'll all be okay. And then I'll be content, I'll be perfect, my whole life will be all set, and we just cannot stop. In the story of the Mahabharata, which is a scripture from India, a great epic if you're not familiar with it, and there is this character called Karna. And he's a very popular and well-known character for anybody who knows the story. If you don't know, I can give you a 30-second summary of the story. It's essentially two warring clans of brothers. The good guys are called the Pandava brothers. They're 5 in number. And then there are the Kauravas, who are the bad guys. And they're fighting this 18-day battle for victory over who's going to get the throne, who's going to rule. And ultimately, as you can say in any story, any scripture, obviously the good guys are going to win. That's essentially the summary of the story. But also, as Yogananda ji explained, every character in that story, it is much more complex than that. I see a lot of audience members chuckling. There are many, many characters and plots and subplots, and each one of the stories is representing a part of our own soul's journey. Because all of these characters represent aspects of our consciousness. The good guys, they represent that energy that is pulling us up towards God realization, and all the bad guys who are on the other side, they're keeping us bound on this plane of matter. And this character, Karna, is a very interesting one because he happens to be one of the Pandava brothers, in essence. The Pandava brothers are 5, but Karna is actually the 6th Pandava brother. He's the eldest of them all. But by some twist of fate, which we are not going to get into, he ends up fighting the battle on the side of the bad guys. He's actually on their side. He has pledged his loyalty there, and he's now facing the battle scene. And obviously, because he's on that other side, he's going to be defeated, and the Pandavas are going to win. Now, Karna is an interesting character because he's very close to all our hearts. It is very hard to watch that story, especially for those of you who grew up with this, to watch that story of Karna played out over and over again at every juncture. Whenever he comes, in project management, we talk about the worst case scenarios and the worst possible outcomes, and Karna is the poster child for that. Every time he comes on the scene, the worst case scenario always happens. No matter how hard he tries. He's actually a very noble man, but because of one thing leading to another, he ends up fighting the battle on the side of the Kauravas, and now he has to face his own brothers. And right before the battle, he comes to know that he is, after all, one of the Pandava brothers. He still has the choice. He could just switch over sides. And assuming the Pandavas win the battle, he'll actually be the heir to the throne itself. But already he has pledged his loyalty to the Kaurava brothers. Now he has to be fighting the battle on that side. Just like that, one thing after another, he has this sacred armor that makes him invincible. But right before the day that he's going to enter the battlefield, again, through a series of incidents, that is taken away from him. And there is this curse that he bears. He has the most powerful weapon. He's the most powerful warrior on the battlefield. But he has this curse that at the moment of need, when he needs it the most, he will actually forget how to use his weapon. So he's facing Arjuna, one of the Pandava brothers in the battlefield. And right when Arjuna is going to attack him, he forgets. He forgets how to use his weapon. And ultimately, as you can tell, he is going to be killed and he's going to be destroyed in the battlefield. Now, this story is very sad for most of us watching. It's poignant almost as you watch the story of Mahabharata because Karna is a very, very noble man. And the reason why it is so heart-touching for all of us, why it's so poignant and why it's so hard to see that story is because Karna represents that part of us that is actually always tinkering with life. He represents that part of us who's committed to making it work. And yet he keeps trying and trying even if he fails. He represents attachment. That's what Yogananda ji taught us. But attachment not to the senses or to desires, not in that way. He's attachment to happiness. His attachment, his commitment to finding it on this material plane. So he keeps getting disappointed again and again and again. Over and over, he tries to find it here, but he cannot. That's why he pledges his loyalty to the material desires. That's what the Kaurava brothers represent. He pledges his loyalty there because that attachment to happiness is always committed to fixing things here, to somehow making it all work. And it's hard for us to actually watch that story unfold in front of our eyes because we can relate to it so deeply. Even if you didn't know the symbolism of it, everybody who watches the story of Karna played out like that almost gets tears in their eyes, because what we are seeing is ourselves. We are seeing that part of us that really hopes, maybe I can make this work. Maybe this will work out. And we keep trying once again, once more. And it is almost as if there is a certain fairness that we feel we are entitled to. Why can't I just have this? I'm not asking for much. I'm not greedy. Why can't I just have enough income so I can lead a comfortable life? Why can't I just have a healthy body? Why should I have diseases? Why should my loved ones be taken away from me? Why would I have this problem? Why would I not just have a little bit of respite from this particular obstacle? We keep trying again and again, and somehow, when we are disappointed and when we forget that we are not perfect, that life, once or twice or again and again, it is going to disappoint us. It is hard. It is upsetting for us because we do still hope that it's all going to work out. Just these last 2 weeks, we have been going through Jesus through the journey, going with Jesus through the journey of Palm Sunday and then Good Friday and Easter. And every time, every year, as we go through these celebrations, we get to relive and we get to hear Asha talk about this. We just heard the oratorio 3 weeks ago where we again started from the birth of Jesus going through his entire life. And I was thinking yesterday about how his life is perhaps the most dramatic representation of this principle itself, because we have Palm Sunday, we sing that beautiful song that most of us who have been coming here for years have heard. That song we perform only once a year when Jesus is walking into Jerusalem. He's just healed the blind, Lazarus is woken up from the dead, and he's performed all these miracles, and he's coming into the city of Jerusalem. He holds so much promise. Everybody is so happy, everybody's singing to him, everybody's welcoming him. And it almost feels for a second that it's all going to turn out so good, that he's going to take over everything. Jerusalem is going to be the most perfect place in the world, that everybody is going to live happily ever after. But underneath, as we talk about it every time we go through this occasion, underneath that glory, that singing and that praise, there is this voice, there's the seed of disappointment already planted. When the Pharisees come approach Jesus during Palm Sunday and they tell him, why don't you rebuke your disciples? They're worshiping you like God. Can you just tell them not to do this? And then Jesus says, if I were to silence them, the very rocks would cry out. Because the whole universe is yearning for that perfection, that everybody just hopes it's going to be all set and we are going to be so happy ever after. And yet, just in 5 days, things just take a dramatic turn. The powers that there's a shift in powers. There's the political system that now has power over Jesus Christ, and he's brought in front of the Roman governor, and then he's being questioned. Are you the king of the Jews? My kingdom is not of this world. That's what Jesus says. If my kingdom were of this world, then my Father would send legions of angels to rescue me, that your men wouldn't have been able to arrest me. And then he says, I have power over you. You better speak to me with respect. And then Jesus simply says, you wouldn't have any power over me if my Father has not given it to you. We hear all of this. And yet Good Friday is so grave. It's intense for most of us. A friend of mine was telling me she doesn't like to come to Good Friday service because it's so sad. It's so grave. I would come for Easter. It's more joyous and it's celebratory. I don't want to come for Good Friday and listen to all that sad music and go through that experience all over again. But just hear Jesus' words. My kingdom is not of this world. He's saying it, and yet our heart yearns for something else. That's why we feel it that way every year as we go through that. We just hope maybe it'll work out. Maybe he won't be crucified. We know how the story goes. And the promise is fulfilled in a day or two, though, because when Jesus does resurrect, he's trying to teach us, and that's what we go through every year, because it's the same verse that we read, be ye therefore perfect. That perfection is possible. That is part of all our potential. That is what we are all destined for. But it doesn't look the way we think it does. It's not going to look the way we can It's not going to look as if we have everything together in our own lives now. We have, gotten the perfect job, the perfect relationship, the perfect home. We have paid off all the mortgage. We have, reached our perfect weight. Our meditation practice is going great. Every day we go so deep, and it just keeps growing and growing year after year. And now we are going to be completely free at the end of our life. Well, that is the promise. But all those pieces here on this plane may not look the way we want them to, or we think they will if we were to reach that goal, because that perfection does not belong on this plane. That's what all these masters come to tell us over and over again. I was reading again because I was hearing the sermon from last week. The reading that Swami Kriyananda wrote for the Easter Sunday itself, he talks about resurrection, and he says resurrection is transformation. But worldly mind cannot understand, I'm paraphrasing here, worldly mind cannot understand what transformation is that Jesus is talking about here. For worldly consciousness, this transformation, I think he says, it is merely a reconfiguration of the same mess of pottage, but adding a new flavoring to it. It's almost a very blunt way of stating it. And in a way, that's really the only capacity with which we keep trying to wade through life. We keep trying to reconfigure the same mess of pottage, and then we add a different flavoring to it, hoping that this time it's going to be better, and this will make it more comfortable. This is going to take me where I want to go. And somewhere in there, if we were to pay attention, if we were to listen to these masters, we realize the problem is somewhere else. We are all here, we want to be better versions of ourselves. Let's be clear. That's why we are here on a Sunday morning. We have a lot of other things that we could be doing. We want to be better versions. We want to be better people. We want to be better at all that we do. We want to get 90 minutes of exercise every day. We want to wake up every morning and meditate, and we want to eat healthy. We want to do intermittent fasting, or we want to be better at our jobs. And we do have to strive in all those ways. All those ways in which we invest our self-effort is important for our own growth. But at the same time, that common thread, the reading that we were reading today, that self-identity itself, I, me, mine, that is the root of the problem that is holding us back from being able to live that potential. And if we were looking for that transformation, that inside-out journey, that resurrection, we have to go to the root of it. We can't just keep pushing that shirt at one point and then have the bubble come somewhere else again, push it again and again, push it hoping that ultimately it'll all submerge in. We have to actually take the shirt out and look at where all the kinks are. We have to actually look at what makes this a shirt. What do I think this is? How can I just remove all the self-identity so I can actually submerge in spirit? I was reading an article written by a very famous CEO of a big multi-billion-dollar company in India. He's one of the first people who started a tech company which grew to be extremely humongous, and he was very, very successful, and he's a man in his 70s now, very wise, and he was saying, the success of any institution, any political system, any business, it relies on one fundamental factor, and he was putting it in somewhat of an engineering term. He was saying, it's the number of units of ego that the leadership has per unit of achievement. And he said, lesser the number of units of ego per unit of achievement, the more successful the political system is, the government is, the industry, the business, the organization, the family. You can apply it anywhere you want. Lesser the number of units of ego per unit of achievement. Now, of course, he was putting it somewhat in worldly terms, but truly, it is also indicative of this principle that as much as we keep trying to tinker on this level, even what we are looking for, that success in life itself, it cannot come just by being more and more identified and more obsessed with all the outcomes that we want. Because that unit of ego that is attaching to that unit of achievement itself is the root cause of this problem. And the more we can step away from it, the more we are able to see we're all part of a much larger flow. We are all part of a much greater reality. And the more we loosen up into that, we are able to flow with it. And that's the lesson that we learned these last 2 weeks, even walking through Palm Sunday and Easter. Because all that Jesus came to teach us was that. Because at the end, when he goes to be crucified, all that he says is, "Thy will and not mine be done." And that's not an easy lesson. And worldly consciousness does not understand that. Oh, Jesus was so kind that he even wanted everybody who crucified him to be pardoned, and yet they did this to him. you know, we forget that, in fact, that was the lesson in itself. Because as long as we can stay in tune, as long as we are able to flow with what's trying to happen, as long as we are able to stay in that state of grace, then everything else becomes secondary. We are just living in such an interesting time now. Every other day I keep having these conversations with people about some dire situation in some country. There is this horrendous war that is happening, and you're scared to even open news in the morning, and every news article has this warning on top, graphic images. When you click on a video on YouTube, you just want to be sure, do I want to watch this right now? And then we are actually exposed to a lot of information that is not easy to consume. We have to live through these times, and we have to actually know what is happening. So it's not possible for us to go under a rock either. Not just that, so many things happening all around the world. Apparently, we are now in a housing bubble. I don't quite fully know what that means, but I keep seeing it in news every day. And inflation is, how many ever decades it's been this high. I don't exactly know all the numbers and statistics as I'm standing here now, but it is an interesting time. We just thought we were done with these 2-3 years of pandemic. How long has it been? Over 2 years now. And we thought we were going to come out of this. And then now, it just looks odd all around. Somehow it feels like, isn't this supposed to be different? We are just coming out of this whole phase of uncertainty and just being isolated and all of this weirdness. We thought this was going to look better. And then we are going through this time, we're just not sure. We are not sure what it's all going to be. And then we are reminded again and again, what is it that we are seeking, this perfection, be ye therefore perfect, that it is our job to serve, to love, to lead a life of kindness and service in this world. When somebody asked Ananda, the great Indian saint, and they were referring to all the suffering and the various ways in which the world doesn't seem fair, and they were asking Ananda, why does God allow all of this? Why do men have to live this way? Why is all of this happening? And she looked at this person and she just had an expression of surprise. She asked him, what are you talking about? The world is perfect. What she meant was the world is perfectly imperfect. The world is doing its job. I'm not trying to minimize any of the suffering that we all go through, not just in the lives of others or wars or things like that. But this was not designed to be anything else. Good Friday was meant to happen. It was part of God's will. Karna was meant to be killed in the battlefield because that's when we start seeing the shade of darkness and light. And in our own lives, we don't know what particular mix we are going to be living here for. A person who's in their late 70s, I was talking to her recently, and she said, it seems like all of you who are in your 30s have signed up for a very interesting lifetime, crumbling political systems and climate change. I think it'll be a very interesting and eventful life. I'm so glad I'll be out of here. I had not thought about it that way, but I do remember, a few years ago, I thought I wanted to go to the Canadian Rockies because I was afraid if I don't go now, in 10, 15, 20 years, all the snow caps would melt. So I wanted to see it while they were all there. But we don't quite know, for those of us in our 30s, but it doesn't matter, 40s, 50s, 60s, we don't quite know what tomorrow is going to look like, what the next 10 years are going to look like. And we have to keep remembering, just as that lady was sharing in this interview, we will be disappointed in many, many ways, not just once, but over and over again. And the only way we can actually make sense of all of this, the only perfection that there is in God. And that's where we share, Swami finishes with that verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Wise is that soul who says, all is Vasudev. We are able to see all of this, just like Ananda did, all the imperfections, and see it as nothing but perfect. Perfect because it's God's play. It is God's will. Thy will be done. He's playing this game with all of us. This whole picture of light and shadow in our own lives, who knows, maybe darkness will be more visible for the next 100 years more than light. And who knows after that, and how does it even matter? Because all of this we start to learn is simply the background. It's the canvas on which the painting is happening. The real project is one of resurrection. is what we were going through the last 2 weeks, is one of resurrecting our own soul, of ultimately realizing that I don't want to keep tinkering, I don't want to just add a different flavoring to this mess of pottage, but I want to be out of it. I want to detach from the sense of I. The best version of myself, as I keep growing, as I keep expanding, is not just somebody who has a perfect body, who is disease-free, who has all harmonious relationship, who has all the wealth he needs and the best apartment in the Bay Area or whatever. The best version of myself has no sense of I. And that bar seems so high, but at the same time, as we go through life, it is not hard for us. And Swami gives the key even in that reading. The only way we can do that is to be able to see God everywhere. All is Vasudev. When things disappoint you, when we are upset, whether with our partners, with our jobs, with whatever life situation, with God Himself, there's no other option but to just see that this is all part of the divine plan. And the more we can see that, the more we can keep reminding ourselves, all is God. There is no I here. No more units of ego. Why even have few units of ego per achievement? Because that's not the perfection we are seeking. That's the promise that Jesus has. That's why that verse is worth remembering as we go through life, because why have any units of ego for any achievement? Because it's not our achievement. It's not our fault, it's not our achievement, it's all God's. And there is self-effort. We do have to work on ourselves, we do have to meditate, we do have to get our life in order. Please don't mistake me when I say that all of this is just tinkering. That tinkering is important, but at the same time, we have to remember this is secondary only to the primary project that we are all working on. We are growing in all these ways. We are even shifting and changing our lives in all these fruitful, useful ways, because through that we will learn to detach from this limited self-identity. We'll be able to expand out of it. We'll be able to gradually grow into that state where we can actually say, from that state of realization, all is God. So, God bless you all.
These are two short songs by Swami, one celebrating the divine through relationships as part of Swami's wedding ceremony, and the other just celebrates all of our relationships in broader community.
Dearest friend, in the blend of your life's path with mine, I have found love is crowned with freedom's vine. Sorrows all disappear when friendship's gaze is clear. May our sight, shunning night, toward God incline. Dearest friend, in the blend of your life's path with mine, I have found love is crowned with freedom's vine. Sorrows all disappear when friendship's gaze is clear. May our sight, shunning night, toward God incline. Is there anywhere on earth perfect freedom, sorrow's dearth? Selfless friendship, blameless birth, cherish these, naught else has worth. Is there anywhere on earth perfect freedom, sorrow's dearth? Selfless friendship, blameless birth, cherish these, naught else has worth. Se in un angolo del mondo c'è la purezza, l'umiltà, vero amore, onestà, fermati lì, blameless birth, cherish these, naught else has worth. Se in un angolo del mondo c'è la purezza, l'umiltà, vero amore, onestà, fermati lì, null'altro ha valore.
From the depths of slumber, as I ascend the spiral stairway of wakefulness, I will whisper, whisper, God, God, God. Thou art the food, and when I break my fast of nightly separation from thee, I will taste thee and mentally say, God, God, God. No matter where I go, the spotlight of my mind will ever keep turning on thee, and in the battle din of activity, my silent war cry will be, God, God, God. When boisterous storms of trial shriek, and when worries howl at me, I will drown their noises, loudly chanting, God, God, God. When my mind weaves dreams, dreams, with threads of memories, on that magic cloth will I emboss, God, God, God. Every night in time of deepest sleep, when my peace dreams and calls joy, joy, my joy comes singing evermore, God, God, God. In waking, eating, working, dreaming, sleeping, serving, meditating, chanting, divinely loving, my soul will constantly hum, unheard by any. God, 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 God. God. God